Every year, millions of people head into the wilderness with a rifle, a camera, and absolutely no idea what they're about to find. Most come back fine. Some don't come back the same. I went through hundreds of hunting encounters caught on camera. These are the ones that kept me up. What you're about to see is real footage, real hunters, real wilderness. Let's start at the top. October 31st, 2016. Halloween, Bear Creek Township, Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, deep in the woods near Francis Walter Dam. Two hunters are doing what they came here to do. Scanning the ground, moving quietly. Eyes down, looking for signs of deer. Then they see something. At first, they think it's animal remains, scattered bones, scraps of something. Deer, maybe. It's deer season after all. These things happen. Then they look closer, and they realize it's not a deer. They called the police. They stayed at the scene. Pennsylvania State Trooper Lisa Brogan, who later testified at trial, said the two men did everything right. Their names were never released publicly. They refused all interview requests. And honestly, you can't blame them. Because what they found in those woods on Halloween night was not something you'd want to be known for finding. The remains were later identified as Grace Packer. She was 14 years old. And this is where the hunting story ends. And something much darker begins. So, who even was Grace Packer? And how did pieces of her end up scattered across the Pennsylvania wilderness? Grace was born into difficult circumstances and placed into the foster care system as a young child. In 2004, she was taken in by Sarah Packer and her then-husband David Packer. In 2007, when Grace was 6 years old, Sarah and David formally adopted her, along with her younger brother Josh. From the outside, the Packer home looked like a family doing good in the world. Sarah worked as an adoption supervisor for Northampton County. She was literally paid by the state to decide which children were placed in which homes. She had professional credentials, a respectable job, an aura of authority, the kind of person you'd trust with vulnerable kids. Except, in 2010, David Packer was arrested and convicted of abusing Grace and another child in the home. Grace was 9 years old. Sarah Packer, the woman whose literal job was child protection, lost her position as adoption supervisor. She was barred from taking in more children. She was investigated by Childline, the state's child abuse reporting system. And yet, Grace was not removed from the house. She stayed with Sarah Packer, the woman who had watched her husband harm her. Grace stayed there. The state had every tool it needed to pull Grace out of that situation. Multiple abuse reports, a convicted predator in the home, a caseworker investigation. Pennsylvania's own Department of Human Services would later release a scathing report concluding there was point after point after point where Grace's life could have changed. It didn't. In 2013, a man named Jacob Sullivan moved into the Packer home, Sarah's new boyfriend, and according to Sarah's own later testimony, he was initially Grace's biggest advocate. Nice to her, kind, but Sarah had a different idea for Jacob Sullivan. She began what she would later, in open court, calmly describe as grooming him, showing him how difficult Grace was to parent, framing this teenage girl, a child with known developmental trauma, as a burden, a problem. One former foster daughter who had lived in the home told the Associated Press that Sarah was constantly demanding Grace be normal. But Grace had a learning disability. She'd never been normal. And Sarah didn't like that. Oh, and there's one detail from this period that I genuinely cannot shake. One former foster daughter recalled watching TV with Sarah one evening, a crime drama, and Sarah casually mentioned, just offhand, like she was talking about the weather, that if she ever ended someone's life, she'd cut the body apart and burn the pieces. Just said it, out loud, to a teenager in her care. Nobody thought much of it at the time. Grace had become, for lack of a better word, a non-entity. She just didn't exist anymore. I wanted her to go away. That's Sarah Packer. In a courtroom, in front of a jury about her 14-year-old daughter, said in a monotone, while appearing to smirk. By July 2016, Sarah had been secretly mixing medication into Grace's pudding for weeks. Her words: to make her compliant, make her groggy. On July 7th, the two of them drove Grace to a rental property near Quakertown, Pennsylvania. What happened there is documented in court records. I'm not going to detail it. What I will say is that Grace looked to her mother during the attack, and Sarah Packer looked back at her 14-year-old daughter and said, "I can't help you anymore. This is now your life." They left Grace restrained and locked in a sweltering attic closet. In July, Pennsylvania summer heat. They intended for her to die there. She didn't. 12 hours later, when they came back, Grace had broken free, was still alive in that attic. Sullivan grabbed her from behind. In his confession, he told her, "Just go, honey, just go." In court, Sarah Packer described holding Grace's hand as it happened. She said, "It seemed like it took forever, but it was only a couple of minutes." Then they had a problem. Grace was gone, in their rental property attic, and police were already following up on her disappearance because Sarah had reported her missing on July 11th, claiming Grace had run away after an argument. The lies Sarah told investigators during this period were detailed and elaborate. She moved to a new town without telling police. She kept cashing Grace's monthly disability checks, over $3,600 after Grace was already gone. She filed a disability review form in August without mentioning Grace was missing. She even fabricated a letter, supposedly from Grace, found in the girl's school file, apologizing for being a burden and saying she was leaving. Investigators determined the letter wasn't written by a teenager. The writing style was an adult's. For months, while police searched for a missing teenager, Grace's remains were stored in the attic of a rented house, surrounded by Jacob Sullivan's comic book collection. Then, in October, as police came back around again, they panicked. Sarah went out and bought a saw. She later told the jury it was for two purposes: cutting firewood and disposing of Grace. In an upstairs bathroom, the two of them cut Grace apart. Then they drove 75 miles northeast to rural Luzerne County, near the Pocono Mountains, and scattered her remains in the woods near Francis Walter Dam, and went home. They were, Sarah said in court, fairly confident they'd get away with it. October 31st, Halloween. Two hunters in the Pocono woods see something they think is an animal. They look closer. Dental records from the National Missing Persons Database made the identification: Grace Packer. The 14-year-old reported missing in July, the one whose mother had been filing paperwork and cashing checks the entire time. The case cracked open almost immediately. Media attention grew, and when it did, Sarah Packer and Jacob Sullivan attempted to take their own lives. Both survived. Sullivan, barely conscious in hospital, told a nurse that Grace had been difficult and that they had kept her for the financial support she provided. Bucks County detectives interviewed Sullivan. He gave a 97-minute recorded confession. Both were arrested in January 2017. The legal proceedings took 2.5 years. Jacob Sullivan pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and 17 other charges. A jury sentenced him to death. Judge Diane Gibbons looked at him and said, "You have no soul." "I have never said that to another human being." Sarah Packer pleaded guilty to first-degree murder in exchange for life in prison. Judge Gibbons turned to her and said, "The use of the word mother out of your mouth is a profanity. It is profane." Neither of them spoke. Grace's younger brother Josh, who was 14 by the time of sentencing, the exact same age Grace was when she was taken from this world, gave a statement read aloud in court by a detective. He said the only way he could bear losing his sister was if adults used her story to protect other children. He said if Grace was told her passing could save someone else, she would ask, "What do I have to do?" "Watch out for all the kids," he wrote, "so that a loss like Grace's loss never happens again." Pennsylvania later conducted a formal investigation into the child welfare failures surrounding Grace's case. The resulting report, 34 pages, heavily redacted, concluded that caseworkers had plenty of opportunity to protect her and failed. Multiple counties, multiple agencies, multiple years of ignored warning signals. Grace's estate later received an $8.9 million settlement from the agencies responsible for her care. An $8.9 million settlement for a 14-year-old girl who loved hip-hop and country music and swimming in summertime, who had an infectious little girl giggle, according to her family, who beamed with joy the first time she ever saw the ocean, whose feet dangled off the seat when she sat in her uncle's big rig because she was too small to reach the floor, who was failed, consistently, systematically, by every adult in every institution that was specifically supposed to protect her. Here's the thing that keeps me up about this case. Those two hunters found Grace on Halloween. They assumed they were looking at animal remains. They moved closer. They realized. They called the police. They stayed at the scene. They refused to speak publicly about it for the rest of their lives. No one knows their names. No one knows what it did to them. But you know what? I think they gave Grace something that everyone else in her life had failed to give her. They noticed. They didn't look away. They didn't assume someone else would handle it. They didn't file a report and forget it. They stayed. Right there in those Pennsylvania woods, on Halloween, with what they'd found, until help arrived. It took hunters accidentally stumbling into the wrong patch of forest to begin the process that brought Grace's story to light. To get her killers arrested, to get Pennsylvania's child welfare system overhauled. The people whose literal jobs were to protect Grace didn't. Two strangers with rifles who were just looking for deer did. Grace Packer deserved better from every system that touched her short life. She deserved to be seen. She deserved to be believed. She deserved someone to stay. She was 14 years old. She loved music and swimming and summertime. And on a Halloween night in the Pennsylvania woods, two men who didn't even know her name gave her the dignity of not being left there, alone. June 10th, 2019. Somewhere deep in the mountains of Idaho. Muskrat, a hunter and outdoorsman who runs a YouTube channel called Muskrat Outdoors, is out checking on his bear bait station when he and his wife Cindy stumble across an old trail they'd never noticed before. Which is strange, because they know this area. They've been out here plenty of times. Curiosity gets the better of them. They follow it. The trail leads them to a tree. And hanging from that tree, suspended by old rusted wire, is what looks at first like an old metal barrel, maybe a martin box. Something a trapper left behind seasons ago. Muskrat pulls it down to get a better look. It's a milk can, old, heavy, and the lid is on it. He pulls the lid off. And that's where things get strange. Inside the milk can, carefully packed and preserved, are animal pelts. Stretched, fleshed, dried, ready for sale. A pine marten, then another. A coyote, a fox, with another marten stuffed inside it. Two badgers. By the time he's emptied the whole thing out on the ground, he's looking at 7 animals worth of meticulously prepared furs. Pelts that someone clearly spent significant time and effort on. Not sloppy work, not the work of an amateur. This is someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And then they just left them there, in a milk can, tied to a tree, in the middle of nowhere.
Strange. I've never come across anything quite like this before. So anyway, let me dig these out of here and see how many animals we're talking about and go from there, I guess. I don't know what to think of this one.
Why would you go through that much effort and then just leave it tied to a tree? Muskrat says on camera, turning the furs over in his hands. They've turned green and moldy. They've clearly been there for years. But the craftsmanship underneath the decay is undeniable. Someone cared enough to do the job properly. Someone had a plan for these, and something stopped them from ever coming back. He estimates he's about 25 miles from the closest town or house. That's not a place you accidentally walk away from your work. That's not a place you forget to come back to. You go 25 miles into the wilderness. You trap animals across a full season. You skin them and flesh them and stretch them and cure them properly. And then you come back for them. Unless you can't. The pelts alone, even on a bad year for fur prices, would have been worth at least $100. Not a fortune, but not nothing either. Especially for someone willing to put that kind of work in. There's something else too. Before they leave, Muskrat notices a strange arrangement of logs nearby. Someone had been cutting pieces for firewood. Normal enough, but the way the logs were stacked, woven up through the branches of a nearby tree in a pattern that made no practical sense at all. It was the kind of arrangement that stopped him cold. Not how you stack firewood. Not how anyone stacks firewood.
Probably 100 yards, not even 100 yards up from where that barrel was with all the critters in it. Gotta be Sasquatch. Maybe Sasquatch killed that guy. Actually, this is kind of strange.
The comments section of Muskrat's video became a kind of informal investigation. People who knew the wilderness, who knew trapping, who understood what they were looking at, started sharing their own theories. Missing trappers, hunters who went out and never came back. In remote wilderness areas, it happens more than people realize. Over 600,000 people are reported missing in the United States every year, and a significant number of those cases involve the wilderness. Some are found, many are not. One detail kept nagging at viewers. If the trapper had simply gotten lost or had an accident on the way back, that would explain why they never returned for the pelts. But why was the milk so carefully sealed and hung? You don't take the time to secure your work like that if you're already in distress. You do that when you expect to come back, when you're planning to return, which means whatever happened probably happened after. The milk can now sits in Muskrat's possession. The pelts rotted away. The questions didn't. Nobody knows who left them. Nobody reported a missing trapper in that area. Nobody came forward to claim them. 25 miles from the nearest house. A season's worth of careful work. A sealed, can hung properly on a wire. And silence. Nick and Ted are two hunters from a popular YouTube channel called The Hunting Public. On this particular trip, they've pushed deep into remote backcountry, almost a mile and a half from the nearest road, tracking white-tailed deer in Missouri. It's late in their trip. They've found 3 fresh scrapes on a ridgetop, which is about as good a sign as you can ask for. They climb into a tree stand, high up, right above one of the scrapes. It's quiet. Still, exactly the kind of moment hunters work for. Then they hear a gunshot. Not unusual. It's hunting country. Gunshots happen, then another, then screaming. Someone is screaming at the top of their lungs somewhere out in those trees. Not a yell, not a whoop. Full, raw, terrified screaming.
Getting chills all down my back.
Yeah. Somebody is screaming at the absolute top of their lungs over there.
Very not good obscenities to someone else. Right before that last gunshot, it sounded like a truck revving up or something, like in gravel, throwing gravel or something.
Yeah.
And then that gunshot was like, that one sounded like a rifle.
And between the screaming, they can hear someone shouting at another person. Aggressive, frantic, the kind of voice that makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. Nick and Ted sit frozen in their tree stand, exchanging glances. This doesn't sound right. More shots follow, not 1 or 2, multiple. They count what sounds like 20 or more over the course of 30 minutes, and the sounds aren't consistent. Some are deeper, lower, like a handgun. Others sharper, higher, like a rifle. 2 different weapons, or more. Then comes the sound of vehicles. Engines revving hard on gravel. A truck accelerating, coming to an abrupt halt, moving again, the kind of chaotic vehicle movement that doesn't happen when nothing is wrong. And then, underneath all of it, a voice, barely audible, screaming something into the trees. Years after the video was uploaded, a viewer with sharp ears and sharper instincts slowed the audio down and listened carefully. What they heard, what they claim to have heard, is someone screaming, "Somebody help. You ended her." Nick is visibly shaken in the footage. You can see it on his face, hear it in his voice. "I'm shaking," he says. "It sounds like a guy that's absolutely losing his mind over there. They're 800 yards from where the sounds are coming from. No cell service. Deep in the woods. No way to help anyone even if they wanted to. No way to call anyone. No way to know what's actually happening. So they make the decision to leave. As soon as they hit an area with a signal, Nick calls the authorities and reports everything he heard. The gunshots, the screaming, the vehicles, the timeline. A calm, clear, detailed report.
Me and a buddy were hunting, and at about 6:45, we heard gunshots, which is not uncommon, but then for 30 minutes straight or so, there was lots of screaming and just people, obscenities, and it sounded like something really bad was going on over there, and there was 20 or more gunshots ended up happening, and then I could hear vehicles taking off and coming to a halt, and we didn't know what to do, and we had no service, so we're trying to report and see if anything had been reported about there. I have pins dropped on a map about how far we were from where we think this was occurring. My name is Nicholas Andrews.
He stays on the line. He answers every question. He does everything right. The game warden investigated the area in the days following the call. They found nothing. No evidence of anything. No indication that anything had occurred. No report of any incident in that area. No investigation opened. Nothing. The video sits on the hunting public's channel. The audio is there. The screaming is there. The comment from the viewer in rural Missouri. "I'm from rural Missouri. Someone's daughter is probably out there somewhere," is still there. And nothing has ever been confirmed about what Nick and Ted heard that day. This is the kind of story that gets under your skin not because it's supernatural or mysterious in some unexplainable way. It's unsettling precisely because it sounds completely, horribly real. A voice screaming for help, another voice screaming back. 20 gunshots, vehicles fleeing 800 yards away. And nobody could do a thing. Whatever happened in those Missouri woods that evening, whether it was something as routine as a hunting dispute that sounded worse than it was, or something far darker, is information that exists only in that audio recording, and in the memory of two hunters who happened to be sitting in a tree at the wrong time. Siberia, Western Scion Mountains, 2014. A hunter named Sergei, an experienced outdoorsman, not someone prone to panic, not someone easily rattled, decides to spend a night alone in the taiga stalking the Manchurian wapiti. He's heard from another hunter that this particular area, a remote ravine called the Long Ravine, is supposedly not good, a bad place. The kind of warning that gets passed between hunters in certain parts of rural Russia, like a folklore handed down from someone who learned it the hard way. Sergei doesn't put much stock in it. He's been doing this a long time. He sets up his position in a tree, camera running, and settles in to wait. For a while, everything is normal. Then, around 1 a.m., something changes. A sound begins, metallic, rhythmic, coming from somewhere out in the dark forest where there should be absolutely nothing. Not another hunter. Not machinery. Not an animal Sergei. A man who knows every sound the taiga can make has ever heard before. Just this steady, strange, knocking sound cutting through the silence of a wilderness that is, by any reasonable measure, completely empty. It goes on for half an hour. You can hear it in the footage. It's not wind. It's not a branch. It has a pattern to it, a rhythm that feels deliberate. After 30 minutes, the sound changes, shifts into something different, lower, stranger, harder to categorize. Sergei has had enough. He decides to abandon his position and head back to camp. That's when it gets worse. On the way back, new sounds begin. Closer this time, much closer. Whatever was out there, whatever had been making those sounds at a distance, now seems to know he's moving. And it seems to be tracking him. Sounds circling through the trees, keeping pace with him, getting nearer with each passing moment. Sergei climbs back into a tree, fires shots into the dark. After the shots, a scream echoes back through the forest. Not an animal call anyone has cleanly identified. Not a bird. Just a sound that cuts across the night and then stops. The noises cease for an hour. Then they come back, louder, closer than before. Sergei fires again, and again. Eventually, silence falls. A genuine silence this time, tense and thick, that holds until morning. He made it through the night. He came back with footage. Later in the expedition, Sergei came across traces of old human activity in the area. Trees marked with cuts used for collecting resin. An abandoned camp, long deserted. Signs that someone had been out there before him, someone who presumably left. The video's comment section became its own rabbit hole. Viewers proposed everything from a shaman performing a ritual in the forest to a creature no known taxonomy accounts for, to the simpler explanation that Sergei encountered another hunter, and that in the isolation of complete darkness, they frightened each other equally. The honest answer is that nobody knows. What we know is this. A man with experience in the wilderness, alone in the Siberian taiga 60 miles from the nearest village, spent a night being circled by something he could not identify, something that responded to gunfire, something that came back after an hour, something that seemed to track his movements through the dark. Whatever it was, it left him shaken enough to film it and share it. And whatever it was, it's still out there. This one is less a horror story and more a masterclass in two hunters keeping their composure while one of the largest land predators on Earth decides whether or not they're a threat. Justin and Colton are out in a remote drainage in the Alaskan wilderness. It's been a long trip already. They've already had one encounter worth talking about. Earlier that day, they'd taken a wolf, which is not exactly a routine Tuesday. After they finished with that, they kept pushing deeper into the drainage, climbing to a vantage point to glass the valley below. That's when they spotted Colton's moose, taken earlier, quartered out, laid up on the riverbank below, and feeding on it. Enormous, brown, completely unconcerned, a grizzly bear. Now here's the problem. They've come a long way into this drainage. Turning back and abandoning the meat isn't really an option. But the bear on that carcass isn't a small animal having a snack and likely to run. This is a full-grown Alaska brown bear, animals that can reach over 1,000 pounds and move at 35 miles per hour. And it has claimed that moose as its own. Justin and Colton drop into the brush and begin moving in. Their biggest problem, as Justin explains on camera, is visibility. The vegetation is dense. They can't see far ahead. They make as much noise as possible, trying to give the bear every chance to hear them coming and make a decision before anyone ends up at close range by accident. When they finally break through to a clear line of sight, the bear is right there. Not running, not retreating, just watching them. What follows is one of the most tense and genuinely fascinating pieces of wildlife footage you'll find on YouTube. It's not screaming or chaos. It's 3 animals, 2 humans, 1 bear, all evaluating the same question at the same time. Who has more of a claim to this moose? Who is going to back down? The feeling I had with this bear, Justin says quietly, is that he was feeling us out and we were feeling him out. And we were trying to decide between the 3 of us who was going to get to keep what on this moose. The standoff stretches. The bear holds its ground. So do they. Nobody wants a confrontation. Nobody wants to escalate, but nobody is leaving either. Eventually, after what feels like a very long minute, the bear makes its decision. It retreats to the gut pile, begins burying it. The hunters move in carefully, one standing guard while the other works on the meat. They load their raft with equipment and push off into the river, leaving the bear behind on the bank watching them go. No one got hurt. Nobody fired a shot. The moose got split between the 2 parties in a negotiation that would have been completely insane to describe to anyone who wasn't there. The thing about this one that stays with you is how calm everyone involved managed to stay. Not because there was no danger, there absolutely was, but because both the hunters and apparently the bear understood that the smartest outcome was to find a way to share the situation without it becoming something else entirely. Not every encounter in the wilderness ends that cleanly. We're going to close this out with something that is equal parts terrifying and, if we're being honest, a little bit deserved. Kamchatka, Russia. A hunter is out in the forest when he spots a bear. The bear appears lethargic, moving slowly, just waking from what looks like a nap, stumbling around with no urgency. The hunter starts filming. Now. At this point, there are several completely reasonable options available to him. Back away slowly. Give the animal space. Let it walk away in peace. All of these are correct choices. All of these are what every piece of wildlife safety guidance on Earth would tell him to do. Because the Kamchatka brown bear is one of the largest land predators on the planet, reaching up to 650 kilograms and nearly 10 feet tall on its hind legs when fully grown. Instead, he follows it, films it walking awkwardly, decides that its lethargic behavior means it's safe to approach, closes the distance, and then, inexplicably, completely inexplicably, walks directly up behind it and kicks it. He kicks a bear. The bear's reaction is immediate and unambiguous. It spins around, it roars, and it does exactly what an animal that large and that powerful does when something physically assaults it from behind. The camera drops. The footage becomes noise and motion. The sounds are not pleasant. Somehow, against what any reasonable statistical analysis of the situation would suggest, the man walks away. An injured hand. Just the hand. Given what he did and what he did it to, this outcome borders on miraculous. Now here's where it stops being funny. Russia is home to roughly half the world's brown bears. Between 2001 and 2018 alone, brown bears in Russia injured at least 178 people and ended the lives of 132 more. The majority of those incidents happened in Siberia and the Far East, exactly the kind of remote terrain where this footage was recorded. And the research is clear on what triggers the overwhelming majority of these encounters: human behavior. Specifically, people who provoke, surprise, or corner animals that would otherwise have chosen to avoid them entirely. In one documented 2015 case from the Khabarovsk region, a hunter's remains were discovered around 400 meters from a bear that had also not survived the encounter. In Kamchatka specifically, between 25 and 140 bears are removed annually as a result of conflict with humans. Conflict that, more often than not, begins with a human making a decision in the field that they cannot take back. The man in this footage made a decision in the field, a spectacularly unwise one. He pulled out a camera, walked up to an animal capable of ending his life without particular effort, and kicked it in the back. And the footage exists, right there, for everyone to watch. A man provoking a bear in Kamchatka, getting the response that decision logically deserves, and walking away with nothing worse than an injured hand, and what we can only hope is a significantly revised understanding of wildlife. Bears, by nature, prefer to avoid confrontation with humans when given the option. Research consistently shows that most bear encounters end without incident, precisely because the animal chooses not to escalate. They're not aggressive by default. They're reactive. They respond to what they're given. What this man gave a sleeping bear in the Russian forest was a kick. What the bear gave back was a lesson he apparently survived. He was luckier than he had any right to be, and the camera caught every second of it. There are 15 million licensed hunters in the United States alone. Millions. More across Russia, Canada, Europe. Everywhere people still go into the wilderness with a purpose. Most of them will never find anything stranger than a deer. But some of them will come back with a story they can barely explain. A sound they can't identify. A discovery they wish they could unsee. That's the thing about going somewhere genuinely wild. You go in looking for one thing, and sometimes the wilderness has other plans. If you've had your own encounter out there, drop it in the comments. And if this video got to you, you already know what to do.